What's another thing that falls into the same category as something we experience, but it's not something we're doing? Can you think of anything? I got one for you, if you can't think of one. Taste. Yeah, taste is another thing that falls into the category of something we experience, but not something that is an act. It's not something we are doing. But when it comes to taste and language, you got to be careful, because there's the act, right, of scooping, for example, a bit of food onto a spoon and putting it into your mouth. And we falsely refer to that as tasting a thing, don't we? So a person says, so think about that. Person says, here, taste this. You reach over, you take a chicken leg, or you scoop up some ice cream, or you take the can of pop that the person is offering you, and you put it in your mouth. We say that you're tasting a thing by going through those actions, right? It's you choosing to put something in your mouth. That is an act, right? That is something you're doing. That's not an experience, it's something you're doing. Scooping the ice cream, putting it in your mouth. That is the act. The tasting itself is not an act. It's not something you're doing. Again, what is it? It's an experience that you are experiencing. So once the food gets into your mouth and you experience the sensations, the flavors of that food, that is the true experience of tasting a thing. So are you still following me along? So far we've talked about acts, we've talked about feelings as being experiences, right? And we've distinguished between those two things. One is an experience that we're experiencing, and the other thing is an act. It's something that we have a choice to do or not to do. So back to thinking. If you'll remember back when we first started having this discussion, and I talked about things that are acts, I included thinking into the category of an act. It's not an experience, it's an act. Why do we say that thinking is an act? Because we have full control over what we continue thinking about. Now, people who aren't willing to think very deep on the matter instantly will argue with that, and they'll say, nope. Things pop into my head all the time. I got no control over it. Right. That's why I didn't say that you have full control over whatever you think. Instead, you have full control over what you continue thinking about, which for all intents and purposes is the same thing. Because if a thought comes into my head, whether I invited it or not, and I recognize that thought's there, I can choose to swat it away and think about something else. So for all intents and purposes, we do have full control over our thoughts. But the correct wording is we have full control over what we continue thinking about. So thinking is an act. I can choose to think a thing. I can choose to stop thinking a thing by choosing to think about something else. So that's interesting, right? We talked about acts. We've talked about experiences, things we experience, and the differences between those things. Now, as far as tasting goes, and that being an experience, think about this. You can reasonably be held accountable for what you choose to put in your mouth, right? Which we falsely refer to as tasting a thing. We can be reasonably held accountable for that because we have a choice in the thing. We chose to put the thing in our mouth. But can you reasonably be held accountable for the flavors and the experience of tasting the thing once it's in your mouth? No, can't be reasonably held accountable for that, because tasting is not something we do. It's something we experience. That's the difference between feelings and acts. Feelings are simply something we experience. Acts are things we do. We ourselves are doing that.